The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. Journalist and author Brandi Morin is in town to give a talk tonight as part of VIU's Indigenous Speaker Series. A survivor of the missing and murdered Indigenous women crisis, her work has appeared in National Geographic, Jazeera English, The Guardian, and the New York Times. Earlier this year, while reporting on an encampment in Edmonton, Morin was arrested and charged with obstructing police operations. Weeks later, those charges were dropped following outcry from groups like the Canadian Association of Journalists and Reporters Without Borders. Brandi Morin visited me in the CHLY studio where she spoke about those experiences and about the message she'll be sharing tonight at VIU.
Tanse, hello. I am Brandi Morin, and I am coming to you from the traditional territories of my ancestors of the Michelle First Nation in Treaty 6 territory, which is also called Alberta, west of Edmonton.
Well, thank you very much for being here. You're going to be at Vancouver Island University Wednesday night, tonight. What is the message you're going to be sharing with people there?
Wow. Yeah. It's an honor to be asked to come there. The people that have come years before to give these talks about reconciliation have been phenomenal, like fellow journalists like Connie Walker, Duncan McHugh, and others. So my talk will be around reconciliation, but it'll be my interpretation of reconciliation. As a journalist, as a survivor of the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls genocide, as an intergenerational survivor of the residential school system, and incorporating everything that I see and report on the ground. So basically, the message is that we are in a critical place when it comes to truth and reconciliation in this country. And I believe that reconciliation is on life support. And if we don't do something to change that trajectory, then we're going to be right back to where we first started off all those years ago when we began this process as a country.
I want to dive more into that, but maybe before I do, I'm just wondering, would you be able to maybe introduce your work a little bit for people who might not be familiar with it?
Yeah, so I am a freelance journalist. I do various different mediums of storytelling. So my main is feature writing, and I produce documentaries, which I really, really love doing, and podcast work. I've been a journalist for, full-time for about 13, 14 years now, telling specifically Indigenous stories across Turtle Island, which is another word for North America, is what we call it, for about 11 of those years. Started way back in the day in community news, began working with the Aboriginal People's Television Network as a video journalist out of Alberta. I went on to work with the CBC Indigenous unit and helped launch that. And then I became a freelancer. My goal was to get out of these boxes that I felt that I was in, and really wanted to get these stories to an international audience. And so I've been a freelancer now for, over 5 years now. And, again, working all over North America and even as far away as Rome. I covered the Papal Apology there, in 2022.
And as you say, you have, it seems to me like you've met your goal. You've had bylines in places like The Guardian, in the New York Times. Could you tell me about maybe some of the work you would, like if there was something you said, hey, this is the piece you should go read that I've done. What are some examples you would suggest to people?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really proud of a piece that I did. It'll be this spring, it'll be 2 years when I did a big feature for Rolling Stone magazine. Now that was awesome to have that opportunity because it was such a different demographic to reach. It wasn't the usual readers and audience that would take these stories in. And I had the chance to go down to the Seattle area and do a story about Indian boarding school survivors, which residential schools, same thing. But in the U.S., they're a lot more behind in that process of unveiling that and truth telling. Although President Biden recently apologized to Indian boarding school survivors, actually just a few weeks ago. But I had the chance to go there and do a really in-depth feature that can be found online, Rolling Stone. I have done a lot of work with Jazeera English, that my and my colleagues, whether they're photographers or videographers that I've worked with, have won awards for. Specifically documentary, because that's a new thing that I'm doing. I'm really proud of a documentary that was really released a year ago today, and you can watch it on YouTube. It's called Killer Water. It's out of Fort Chipewyan, Alberta, and it's around the, decades-long contamination of the community from the oil sands and different other pollutants in the area. And there had been a couple of major tailing spills by an oil company up there that had been covered up. And we did the documentary around that. And we actually won this year. In April, we went to Toronto and New York City. We won the Sidney Hillman Award for that, which is a really top honor in Canada. And it was just a 2-person team. And so I'm really proud of that.
And like you say, you're a veteran journalist. You've been all over the world. You've covered a lot of things. And January 10th of this year, you were in Edmonton. You were covering an encampment that was in the course of being dismantled. And you ended up getting arrested. For a while, you were facing charges. You could have ended up with a sentence of up to 2 years. Can you walk me through that day and the fallout from that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been covering a lot of police conflicts with Indigenous people and land defense, different actions from the Wet'suwet'en Nation here in BC or Fairy Creek and others. But on this day, I was at a local Indigenous encampment, and the Edmonton City Police were sweeping various encampments over several weeks. So I was there working for a couple of days. I never thought that I would be arrested in my own territories. Those are my home territories. And I always thought if something were to ever happen, because I have colleagues that have been arrested in these situations, that it would happen in a remote area somewhere with the RCMP or, in different situations. But I was pretty stunned when it happened. So I was doing these in-depth interviews with these unhoused individuals to write a feature for Ricochet Media, which is an independent media company that I was on assignment for. It was my second day there. There had been a violent incident the day before after I had left where the police violently arrested a young Blackfoot man. So there's a lot of different tensions happening. But when I was there that second day, there was no police. And I was conducting these interviews and got noticed. Someone came and said, "Look, the police are here." We were in a structure like a teepee, like a tent. And I went outside, and it was very cold, by the way. It was probably like minus 25 and snowing. Went outside, and the police were finishing cordoning off the area. So they had yellow crime scene tape set up. And, I realized that they were probably preparing to come in and remove these people. I seen a group of media with TV cameras and others that had just arrived there, and they were far back because it was in this big open field behind this yellow tape. So I decided, I'm inside, I'm staying in here. And I just want to say that because of my experiencing covering police actions, I'm aware of the police often trying to corral or control media coverage. And they create what they call media exclusion zones, and they decide where the media can and can't go. But we have, as media in this country, successfully sued the RCMP, say in Fairy Creek, for instance, for impeding the media. And so I'm aware of these things, and I'm aware of my rights as a journalist, that I'm not there to impede the work of the RCMP. I'm there to do my job as a journalist and to document that, and also to look for potential violence for these individuals, to be on the receiving end of. So I'm there, and these individuals come outside, and there's kind of like this face off between them and the police, and I'm there recording it with my cell phone, and the police say, you have to leave. If you don't, then you're going to be forcibly removed and possibly charged. And they just put their eagle feathers up, and they just decided that they were going to stand their ground, that they were staying. And the police rushed forward, and here I am covering it. And it only a few seconds passed, and I'm recording it with my cell phone, and it's violent. There's like snow flying everywhere and people screaming and shouting. And this one officer, this female officer, beelined it for me and told me that I had to leave. And I said, no, I'm a member of the media. I'm here to document this. And she said, you have to leave. You have to get out of here. And I said, no. And here I am trying to still document all of this craziness that's unfolding. And she started physically pushing me away. And she said, you go get back there behind that, those lines. And I knew what those exclusion zones were. So I said, no, I'm here. I'm not impeding your work. I'm here to do this, to document this. Next thing you know, I am in handcuffs, taken away, and put in the back of a police van, taken to headquarters and held for several hours. But I really want to note that my interpretation and my decisions in those moments, I think, are different than other journalists and people that are in legacy media. My thinking in those situations is I know that our people, Indigenous people in this country, are more likely to be targeted by violence via the police than any other group. And I know that our people are killed at staggering rates by police and RCMP across this country. I also know how our people are portrayed in media or by police. So I was thinking those kind of things also when I decided to stay and document that. I documented the dialogue, the interactions, everything. Whereas the media that had come and showed up at the last minute and stayed behind the lines 100 or so feet away, when their broadcast went on the news later, all you could see is the backs of the police. You never got any context as to what was happening. And a lot of times the police will give press releases about how these people are criminals and paint this picture of what the situation is. And I find that my work is really important to circumvent that, to just really be there. And it's common for me to embed in the work that I do as well. So yes, I was charged. I was held. It was a horrible time. It was a really dark place, mentally, emotionally, spiritually for me. I questioned everything. I questioned whether I wanted to keep doing this work. I looked at my little daughter, who was not 6 years old at the time. And I said, is this worth it? I could have been a criminal for the rest of my life. It could have derailed everything that I've worked for and believed in. So it was dark. It was really dark for a while. And then, thank God, the charges were dropped. And I just became regrounded in the reasons why I do this work and why, it's important. But also it's indicative of how our people as a whole are generally treated and criminalized.
Midcoast Morning is made possible by the Community Radio Fund of Canada and generous listeners like you. Support and grow our nonprofit newsroom project today at chly.ca/donate with a monthly or one-time donation. With your support, we can expand Midcoast Morning from 2 to 3 original programs per week to cover local news, current affairs, and arts and culture.
Today on the program, I'm speaking with freelance journalist Brandi Morin. She's in Nanaimo to give a talk tonight as part of VIU's Indigenous Speaker Series. In 2022, Morin received an Edward R. Murrow Award for her work covering the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Right now, we're speaking about an incident that occurred in January of this year, when Morin was arrested while on assignment covering an encampment in Edmonton. She was charged with obstructing police operations, charges that would ultimately be dropped, but not until several weeks following her arrest. What was that time like? And also during that time, there was an outpouring of support from, say, for example, people in the media and media organizations, or I should say like media unions. What can you tell me maybe about what you saw as a result of what happened?
Well, my editors at Ricochet Media, I'm a freelancer, and so they didn't have to do anything for me, but they stuck up for me and they fought for me. They were immediately on the phone to the Canadian Association of Journalists, the Committee to Protect Journalists, as well as finding me a lawyer. That support was incredible. And I think we had a press conference at some point, a virtual press conference where we had multiple organizations that participated, along with Amnesty International and, the Coalition for Women in Journalism. They're amazing as well. That organization all advocated for me, which I'm really, really grateful for. I think that just kind of raising that awareness helped it to be, I guess, maybe a higher profile case that maybe could have played, had an influence on whether the prosecutor wanted to take this on and pursue it. But I know, personally, I wasn't able to do as much work as I normally could take on because I was just very much struggling. It was heavy. It was a heavy place to be. And I was feeling and taking on that criminalization process. Even the attacks that I would receive online by people, just the racism and people saying that I deserved it, that I needed to be locked up. Or I even remember dreading, I had to show up within 2 weeks to get my mugshot and fingerprints and everything. And I kept thinking the charges are going to get dropped. So I don't want to do this. I don't want to be in their system. But if I didn't do it, then there would have been a warrant out for my arrest. So those 2 weeks, I was like, man, and the charges were dropped. And so I had to go in to headquarters. And for me, this is a big deal. I went and got the mugshot, fingerprinted, and the officer asked me, he said, is there anybody that you can give us for an emergency contact? And I said, what do you need that for? He said, well, if anything were to ever to happen to you, we would have it. What I thought of in those moments is many of our women and girls who are experiencing a genocide right now are in those systems. The police and authorities use their mugshots when they are looking for them or investigating their murders. And it's a dehumanizing thing. But I was in that system and I didn't want to be. So that was a really crappy part of the whole experience, but again, our women they're in these systems because of, just strategic oppression by the society that we live in, by the institutions and the colonial governments and corporations that are strategically oppressing from our people, stealing resources, stealing land, without consent, which equates to the stealing of our women, the raping of our women without consent. It equates to the same thing. And so everything is so connected in regards to these different crises that we're experiencing. And I felt totally in the middle of all that, not only because I'm a survivor, but because of the work that I do, but because, again, I was in their systems and I felt that it got a hold of me. And then when those charges were lifted, I was on the phone that day with two of my colleagues. We were planning a reporting trip. I got the text from my lawyer and I screamed and wailed. The sound that came out of me was out of this world. And I cried and cried for about 20 minutes straight. And it was like whatever had been on me and had, been bringing me into this dark place was releasing, and it was gone.
I would imagine it's even just reporting on some of these subjects that are the focus of your work. Like if you're not yourself being directly caught up and impacted by your work could be difficult enough. How do you move forward? So, you mentioned the incredible relief, obviously, when the charges get dropped. But now how do you move forward and take care of yourself and continue to do that kind of work?
Yeah, it's just something that I've had to learn as along the way. There's been times when I'm on the road and having nightmares in my hotel rooms and not being able to sleep or having to take prescription sleeping pills to be able to get through the impacts of what I was, reporting on. Thank God I haven't had to do that for a couple of years, but there are instances where, I'll get a nightmare or, these situations will be very, very intense, but I just try to approach it with a really kind of holistic, kind of recipe where I make sure that I'm taking care of myself mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. It's essential. When I'm on the road, and when you're on the road, it's really easy to eat like crap because you're going and you need to go grab fast food or whatever it is. It's easy to maybe not exercise or to not stay hydrated. If I do not concentrate on those things while I'm out on the road, I don't do well at all. And so I work extra hard to make sure I'm feeding my body healthy things and staying hydrated and getting sleep. I incorporate different things like prayer, and I have people that I talk to. I even go to therapy. I'm still very much accessing therapy, and I have now, for at least 9 years straight now. I don't go as often as I used to, but it's just essential. Again, to be able to work through different things. And yes, we do take them on. I am very passionately committed to what I do and to bringing these stories to the forefront. I do deeply care, and I am, greatly affected by it. But, that's what drives me, is because I believe so much in it, because these stories have been either suppressed or not told properly for so long that, that's what I strive for. And there's just so much out there to be unveiled. So, yeah.
And when you do that, when you put work into the world, I think this is something that probably every journalist wonders about is the impact of that work, maybe the change, the impact you would hope it would make on the world. Could you tell me a bit about, what you would be hoping for and maybe what you've seen, the impact of what you've put out there?
Yeah, obviously we hope that it would transform, people's world, people's experiences, that it would compel authorities, governments to make the changes that they need to make. But I think, like, for the people and the different communities that I specifically report on, it's just important for me to get their stories right, to treat them with respect, and to just have their stories have their moment and to have them shine. I was just in Winnipeg last week, and I was on assignment with Jazeera English. The story won't be out yet for a while, but I was meeting with some of the families of the women that were killed by Jeremy Skibicki, the serial killer, and that their bodies dumped in the landfills. And they're going to be, finally, the Manitoba government and the feds are putting in some money too, going to start searching for the bodies of 2 of these women on December 2nd. And, you know, meeting with these families, thinking about how they're giving me their time and opening up themselves to share about their loved ones, even though they're experiencing this, like, just unimaginable, horrifying grief and pain. I am in total awe and thankful that I get those opportunities. I'm thankful that, you know, they trust me and that I have the privilege of telling these stories to the world and doing my best to, you know, honor the life of these women.
And I think there's always a thread where people in the media can ask about how have these stories not necessarily, sometimes not being told at all, sometimes not being told in a good way. But maybe I'm wondering, how do you think people should receive those stories? People should read those in a good way. What do you think they should take away from them? What do you think after reading them they should change about the way they move through the world?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that people should consider that others of a different, you know, racial background or other minority community or individual, when they are thinking about the experiences of those people, that, you know, I tell people to really think of them as your neighbor. Think of them as your daughter or sister or relative, and take that in. Think about it from that perspective. And I just, you know, people, besides all of these, like, differences and barriers and statistics and inequalities, we are all human beings. And I think if we can come at these with a human level, that is where it's most powerful. That is where we can start connecting with each other, getting to know each other, and having really meaningful conversations and inspiration to, you know, make a difference for each other.
At the beginning of our conversation today, we were mentioning your talk at VIU. You used the phrase that you feel like maybe reconciliation is on life support. Maybe as we get short on time here, I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that idea, and maybe, you know, if someone is listening to this in Nanaimo, what do you think is the reason that they should come out and hear what you have to say?
Yes. So one of the messages of the talk that I'm giving is that reconciliation is on life support. This is my view. This is my experience. And it is alarming, and it is crucial that we understand the crossroads that we are at as a country. And that if we don't do something to change that trajectory, then we are going to end up back where we started or worse. And I'm going to get into further details when I do my actual talk. But I would love to see people here at, at Nanaimo and at the university. I have a couple of cousins that are coming out that live in the area. And, I travel all across North America, whether it's for reporting or doing these types of talks. And I just really hope to share some information and inspiration with you and to connect with you there, shake your hand, so that you can take out what you learn and take it back and apply it hopefully in your own life.
Well, Brandi, thank you so much for coming down to CHLY to talk about it.
Hi, Taniki. Thank you so much for having me, Joe.
Brandi Morin will be speaking at Vancouver Island University tonight at 6:30. That's Wednesday, November 20th. If you're listening to this as a podcast, the event will be in the university's Malaspina Theatre. You can also watch online via Zoom. It's free to attend. Anyone interested can register via Eventbrite. That's our show for the day. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and RB Frew is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHLY's newsletter at chly.ca/subscribe for updates from our nonprofit newsroom and more. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another Midcoast Morning.
Midcoast Morning would not be possible without the funding of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Midcoast Morning is a project of CHLY's nonprofit newsroom. Support nonprofit journalism in Nanaimo and on the Salish Sea today by becoming a monthly sustaining donor at $5 or more per month. Support the program at chly.ca/donate. If you're already a supporter, record a voice memo telling others where you're listening from and why they too should support our work. After you're done, you can email it to us. Also, share the podcast with your friends. While Meta is blocking Canadian users from sharing news content on their Facebook feeds, you can still share our podcast directly with your friends via Facebook or Instagram Messenger. Finally, this program acknowledges and gives thanks to the Nanaimo First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.